He was deep in thought after hearing Velzard's shout, but something came to his mind. Velzard, you bastard. I see, you didn't notice. You've been harboring jealousy toward me this whole time. Velzard reacted quietly to Guy's murmur. She laughed. However, that didn't mean the stampede would stop. Guy, I have always loved you. And then, the world was dyed white. The nihilistic world of Testarossa are of a different nature, and that white is a highly pure, transparent, isolated absolute stop, the frozen world or eternal world. By the will of the ruler, all the laws were forcibly stopped working. As time passed slowly, Guy found himself in a bit of confusion and deep understanding. I see. No wonder jealousy is taking so long. Or so he understood. At this point, Guy had realized Velzard's hidden power. However, the extent of its effects remained unclear. It was a conflicting power. When it came to controlling that, it would be difficult with half-hearted mental fortitude. It was possible because of Velzard. And by the time she didn't let Guy realize it, it was certain that Guy's intentions had already been figured out by Velzard. Now, what should he do? Guy pondered over it again. Unlike the fairly easygoing interior of the barrier, Guy, who was involved, was very serious. Once he sorted out the problems, he concentrated on one point. How to stop Velzard from going berserk. There was also the question of how to prevent the Ivarage's attack, but he didn't have the luxury of paying attention to that. The saying goes, he who chases two hares will catch neither, but Guy knows his own abilities well, and will only move in a way that ensures steady results. It would have been easy if Velzard had been manipulated, but that wasn't the case. She was challenging Guy of her own free will. In that case, Jai had no choice but to stick with Velzard until she was satisfied. Tisk, I heard that's a pain in the ass. Guess I'll just have to do it. He'll defeat Velzard. He have no choice but to think about what to do after he win. That said, it was a very difficult situation. Once again, the absurdly powerful absolute freezing wave grazed Guy's cheek. If it had hit directly, it would have pierced through countless defensive measures, and the multiple barriers likely causing a fatal wound. As proof, he sensed the mountain range collapse in the distance. As a result of a direct hit to the bedrock halfway up, the molecular bonds had been loosened, and it was likely unable to withstand its own weight. It's unreasonably violent. That's why true dragon are such a hassle. They're so selfish, it's troublesome. Without considering the damage to the surroundings, they wield their power according to their own whims. People of that kind are basically troublesome and suited for combat. In fact, Guy used to have a similar personality in the past, but now he had a promise with Veldanava. He lived freely, but had started paying attention to those around him. That's why he realized how bad the odds are. Guy looked at Velzard. Her white ice hair and golden eyes are beautiful. She was terrifyingly beautiful, but the danger seemed to be proportional to her beauty as well. Against Velzard, who boasted inexhaustible and overwhelming magical power, Guy resolved himself that he didn't have the leeway to make any moves in the back, either. Oh man, you going to drive me to this point? This was the first time Guy had been cornered since he'd fought Velzard in El Dorado or Rotor. However, that didn't mean defeat. It's just that it's rare for him to get serious. In fact, the ultimate skill king of pride, Lucifer, is the most powerful authority precisely because it is wielded by Guy. The power of this skill in the king of pride, Lucifer, is varied, but the essence of it is a complete reproduction of an ability you've seen once before. It was one of the reasons Guy had longed for the other demon lords to develop ultimate skills. To reach the strongest existence, one must observe various ultimate skills and assimilate them into one's own. With this in mind, Guy has learned powers from countless strong beings, from ancient times to the present. As a result, he was able to deal with all kinds of situations. Naturally, that was reflected in the combat aspect as well. Even the pseudo-dragon form shown by Twilight, and even the nihilistic world that Testarossa probably wanted to keep hidden, were all imitable by Guy using the king of pride, Lucifer. This was the reason why Guy was the most vicious. Since they could make even the enemy's power their own, Guy wouldn't lose to them in numbers. That's no exception, even if we're up against Velzard. But this time, it'll be difficult. From Guy's perspective, he wants to analyze Velzard's abilities and make them his own. By doing so, it would become easy to nullify them, ensuring his victory and the domination of Velzard. But in order to do that, he had to make the target use their power and recognize it. Tisk, she probably won't use it in front of me when the time comes. Velzard had realized that Guy could mimic the power of others. In that case, she shouldn't have exposed her own power as a trump card. That was why she was only using King of Patience, Gabriel now. As for Guy, he was already aware of Velzard's King of Patience, Gabriel, from the beginning. Therefore, he was able to deal with the battle earlier with minimal effort, and he detected all dangerous attacks in advance, perfectly avoiding them. However, simply understanding the authority is meaningless. Regardless of the authority, Velzard's power is dangerous, and due to the difference in mana amount, if there is even the slightest opening, one could suffer a painful and potentially fatal blow in that moment. When showing Guy his own power, it will be a decisive moment. Whether Guy's analysis can keep up in that instant will surely determine the outcome of the battle. It was depressing for Guy to understand that. Battles were something he had to win for sure, and situations where he couldn't predict the future were out of the question. Not to mention, a strategy like a gamble. Guy felt like his pride had been trampled. But even so, Guy believed in his own strength. Well, there's no way I'd lose. No matter how cornered he gets, Guy's heart won't break. Guy let out a small laugh, brimming with confidence as the absolute strongest. A stinging time passed, and Guy escaped Velzard's time stop. If he hadn't understood that power, his defeat would have been decided the moment he stopped moving. It was a power that was too reckless to rely on brute force to stop its kinetic energy, by exerting its influence on all possible substances. It was because it was reckless that he was able to repel it with the force of his will. It was a feat unique to Guy, but it wasn't that exhausting, so there was no problem. Besides, that time was precious. By observing Velzard the whole time, Guy had gained a certain conviction. There was no doubt that Velzard was acting from the heart, but there was a good chance she'd been tempted by someone. Not to mention the twilight that dwells in Velzard. Velzard herself seemed to think she was acting of her own free will, but she thought it was the result of cleverly guiding her. That bastard probably wants to watch me and Velzard fight a real battle and use it for his own theory. Velzard was no fool, but she had a single-minded side to him. To clever Twilight, deceiving her must have been as simple as twisting a baby's hand. The trouble is that this has nothing to do with the influence of power and so on. If he didn't move Velzard's heart, Guy's words wouldn't reach him. That would be very troublesome, and from Guy's perspective, it would be a gamble with little chance of victory. That's why he couldn't get over it, so he kept watching her. He had to make a decision soon. He couldn't leave Velzard alone any longer. And more than anything, he have a bad feeling about this. Twilight is the worst prankster in history. He devises all kinds of schemes, and whether they succeed or fail, he is a great villain who spreads malice throughout the world. In the past, there was a side of him that he couldn't hate more than he thought, but one day, he started experimenting inhumanely, as if someone had changed. Did that bastard Daggerel complain too? In the end, he wouldn't tell me what happened. Well, it's none of my business anyway. Even if something had happened to an old acquaintance, as long as he laid his hands on something precious to him, he was still an enemy to Guy. Guy quietly grew more and more angry. It served as fuel, burning Guy's core. How ridiculous. Immortality, huh? A power that can be achieved without relying on others is completely unworthy of someone like you. Twilight's attempt to fulfill his own desires is his personal business, so he can do as he pleases. However, when it comes to using his own people, his partner, it becomes an extremely unpleasant matter. Whether Velzard was deceived or not is merely Guy's own assumption. However, Guy was angrier than ever, so the truth didn't matter. Guy unleashed the elemental magic. Napalm burst at Velzard. A scorching dragon, twisting its lung body, danced wildly round Velzard. Although the magic burns anything it touches to the ground, it was expected that it would not affect Velzard. From the start, Guy had used it with the intention of binding her. However, this was also pointless. As soon as Velzard breathed out, the diamond dust created by her were scattered, blooming into a large fire flower in the air before vanishing. It was the freezing breath a wave of absolute freezing emitted in her dragon form. However, Velzard is capable of using it even in her human form. Guy clicked his tongue inwardly. At the same time, he was impressed. She really is strong. Guy smiled happily. Velzard was an extraordinary powerhouse, as recognized by Guy. Her strength had not diminished since the time they first met. On the contrary, she continued to grow stronger, and she was now in perfect balance with Guy, not inferior to him in the slightest. Guy was greatly satisfied, feeling that she was a fitting partner. The challenge of dealing with such an opponent was certainly troublesome, but it also fueled his motivation. It's standard practice to say that those without emotions or wills are weak. The reason Twilight had lost to Testarossa was probably because he'd abandoned that emotion. If you kill his emotions, he'll be left behind from the change. That's why those without wills don't grow. In that regard, Velzard was different. If Velzard was only rampaging while being controlled by others, they wouldn't have been able to reach such strength. It's precisely because they are consumed by the extreme form of jealousy that they have become this powerful. Has Twilight been using them while they also turn it to their own advantage? Well, either way, I'll have to deal with that bastard Twilight. Regardless of whether Velzard regains their sanity, Guy is determined to handle Twilight. Sigh. Looks like I was overthinking things. If I just simplify things, the answer becomes clear. He throws aside the distractions and focuses solely on the problem at hand. If Velzard is selfish, then Guy is the embodiment of arrogance. Without considering the opponent's circumstances, acting purely on the desire to crush what displeases him, this is his approach, acting freely according to his own will. Once he remembers this is who he is, the rest is easy. He'll just let his pent-up anger explode and rampage as his heart desires. At this point, Guy finally got serious. He stopped leaving his remaining strength behind in preparation for the Ivarage, and faced Velzard with all his might. "Ah, so you've finally gotten serious." Velzard rejoiced. With this, she could finally enjoy fighting in a world where she was alone with Guy. Just thinking about it made Velzard smile naturally. Still, Guy really is strong. The battle had begun, and the date had already changed. Neither of them had been at full strength, but the battle had taken place in a realm where no ordinary demon lord could enter. Guy didn't show any openings. He was acting as an example, as if he could see through her plan. Moreover, like humans, Guy was gathering magicules from the atmosphere and using them to cast magic. In other words, since he was using the energy of Velzard to fight, it was as if he wasn't exhausting himself at all. Normally, this would be an inefficient way to cast magic, but when Guy does it, it's a different story. There is no time lag whatsoever, and he can instantly convert magicules into magic. Guy is strong. He was the strongest of the primordial, and even if Velzard were to go all out to defeat him, she wouldn't know if she could win. Velzard, who had been by Guy's side all this time, knew why Guy was the strongest. Guy's genius observation allowed him to understand the true nature of the skill, just by looking at a glimpse of it. Therefore, it was as if all of Velzard's tactics had been exposed. If she had only possessed the ultimate skill King of Patience, Gabriel, the possibility of victory would have been almost zero. That was why Velzard had warmed her inner hand for this day. The hand called Twilight had been sealed by Testarossa's intervention. Her only left trump card, King of Envy, Leviathan behind, but it looks like Guy found out about this too. I really can't let my guard down, can I? Velzard grew irritated, and was just as happy. That's why she's so proud of being the only one who acknowledged it. But she can't just be happy. Velzard, his amount of energy is more than twice that of Guy, has only one remaining trump card. This is because there is only one chance for victory. Right now, she's using Frozen World to circulate magicules, so it's not wearing her down at all. But now that Guy's serious, she should have assumed she'd lost that advantage. But she couldn't let her impatience get the better of her. If she let her skills show, her chances of victory would be squashed. As usual, after cornering Guy with King of Patience, Gabriel she had to make her move with King of Envy, Leviathan to aim for a finishing blow. This is why I should have prepared more trump cards before I had to deal with Guy. Twilight's pseudo-dragon form didn't even serve as a diversion. Luck doesn't seem to be on Velzard's side, but that's just fate. Guy had gotten serious, so her goal was as good as accomplished. Velzard flew toward Guy with all her might. And so, Guy and Velzard, the ones at the top of the world, finally got serious.